I don't know the extent to which you're familiar with Aristotle or the ancient world. It's sort of beyond this course to go through it too deeply, but what's really helpful to know is that Aristotle didn't just come up with his ideas about memory out of nothing or out of nowhere. He is responding to some of the other ideas that were in the air from his times, and he is building on the ideas that are in Plato. We know that for sure. So it's important to begin with some response, some ideas that are found in Plato. So for Plato, and this is largely it's entirely in Plato's dialogues, which I highly recommend that at some point you read the dialogues of Plato so that you can really get a deep understanding of the origins of Western thinking, and especially a book called The Republic. So there's memory mentioned throughout, and we're going to try and compress what those ideas about memory were and how that they impacted Aristotle. And really, it's very simple. For Plato, memory is the retention of sensation and operates, for the most part, on anticipation. So, for example, we might expect a pleasurable feeling based on something that happened to us in the past. We either encountered an object or there was an event that gave us pleasure. And if that past event or object were to be here now or happening to us now, it would give us the same experience of pleasure as before, or at least we could predict that it would. And so the same thing goes for pain. If you had experienced pain in the past from an event or an emotional experience or an object causing pain, then you could predict that when that object or that event repeated itself, that you would also have a painful experience in the present moment, assuming that all the circumstances were similar. So Plato, very interestingly, links this basic understanding not just to actual things reoccurring and happening again, but to something quite surprising, which is he links it to motion and to change. So a change is something that comes from motion of one kind or another, and he thinks that memory is the product of motion and also the substance of motion. So what that basically means is that when we encounter something that was pleasurable from the past, that thing, whether it was an event or an object, was in motion, and we were in motion when we encountered it. So that means that our motion came together and we changed. To be in motion means to be changing, and to change means to be in motion. So in other words, if we encountered something that was pleasurable, we encountered it in motion through time, and that encounter changed us. And we also probably changed that object or that event as well, because our reaction of pleasure or pain comes outside of us and has a ripple effect. And so that's kind of what's meant. There's no encounter with anything that isn't in motion, and there's no encounter with anything that doesn't cause change. So that past event changes us, and that's why it remains in memory. And when we see it again, that change happens yet again, or we might change ourselves to avoid that thing that we remember from the past that hurt us. So that's a really, really interesting way to think about it. Motion and change. And it goes deeper because wherever there's motion, there is speed and there is duration. So there's change coming from motion, and then that motion has speed and duration, which means how long that it lasts. So slow motions have a particular kind of memory that they produce. For instance, the quality of how a memory of an experience is created and remembered has to do with how fast that action and for how long that action lasted. And when fast motions occur, that also dictates how much of a memory can be experienced and remembered. So we have this other element, which is the speed of how an event or an object occurred to us and for how long, and that affects memory. So the world that we sense is constantly changing, and more than that, it's becoming. And so becoming is a very, very specific concept in Plato. And again, I hope you read the dialogues of Plato so you can get a sense of what this is all about. They're really fascinating. They follow a character named Socrates, and it's basically a bunch of theater plays, but all of this deep philosophy is in it. And so the idea is that the world is constantly changing, and it is becoming. It is becoming that which it will become. And if you're into the Bible and all that stuff, there's actually a scene when Moses encounters the burning bush and God is in the burning bush, and he says that his name is Abba, and Abba means I am becoming that which I will become. So there's always this change, and of course that's a very memorable scene from the Bible, because it encases all of these things that we're talking about, as memory having to do with motion and with change. Fire is itself a kind of change, and the speed of the fire is involved there, and that impacts our memory, and the duration of how long the fire lasts, and then this idea that I am becoming what I am becoming, or I will become that which I will become. And then in some translations of the Bible, that is, of course, I am the great I am. There's different ways of translating the Hebrew, but nonetheless, it is this idea of becoming. And so we can see in that these notions and these ideas of memory as being change, as being change in motion, and the speed and the duration of motion. So everything that we sense in the world is constantly changing, and it's becoming, and it is constantly becoming something other than what it presently happens to be. So we're going to talk about this a little bit more in detail, but if that's a whole lot of thinking to think about, that's a good thing. And you can read this in the notes that you can download with the book of Aristotle's thoughts on memory and reminiscence. But don't let that get too puzzling or anything like that. It's really a very simple idea that just sounds complex because we go through these different layers. Just that events and objects are moving, and they're changing by virtue of them moving. Anything that is moving must change, and anything that is changing must be moving. And things that are changing and moving change at different speeds, and their change has different lengths of duration. And so basically what that means is our memory and how we remember things is affected by how much they are changing, how quickly they are changing, and for the length of time that they are changing. And that impacts how we can remember things, and it also impacts the amount and the ability that we have to remember things.